Okay, everyone, welcome back to the Rock and Roll channel. I apologize. I had planned on coming back in Monday night, definitely yesterday, after Coach Norvell's press conference, after the first day of spring ball to talk about the team a little bit, and then I got sidetracked doing some things and I didn't come on till now, so I apologize for that. But man, has so much happened since the last time I spoke to you. I got caught up booking an Alaska cruise of all things, so that's something I'm going to be doing. Hopefully, I'm the type that doesn't believe I'm actually going there until I actually leave, um, and vlogging for that. So, but right now it's Florida State football talk. No wrestling tonight on this talk. I'll do another vlog about WrestleMania and AEW another time. But today I want to focus on Florida State because so much has happened since we last talked. I want to say Friday. Yes. So here's what's gone on since we last talked. Coach Norvell did his press conference on Monday. Really, and coach, he did his press conference, and all the coaches spoke to the media. He does a cool thing where the day before the first day of practice of spring football, he invites all the media to the stadium, provides lunch for them, and they all get to talk to him. And well, not him there. He does the press conference, but they get to talk to all the assistant coaches, and then he talks to all of them at one time, which I don't know too many coaches in the country that do that. So they had that, and then he spoke, and he just talked about that this is probably the fastest team he's had since he's been there, which is something we talked about, the speed of this team. He talked about how they're breaking bench press records since he's been there, and to lose a Braden Fisk and Jerry Verse, and you're breaking records, that's impressive. But you just saw, I think everyone to a T who saw all the interviews and with him, you could just see the confidence they have in this team. Yeah, there's going to be some work because there's a lot of new players, but someone asked him that, and he flat out said, "We have the same amount of returning players this year as we did last year." Now, coaches have to do some of that coach talk sometimes, but the facts are there. If how many returning players you have and you don't have, and especially with the portal these days, it's really impressive how many we have returning. And he made a statement that really caught my eye. Warchant mentioned this as well, that he said he was told, and most coaches will just say it like it's things are a fact. If they're wrong, they're wrong. They don't tend to circle back. He said he was told, which I like. It's very humble of a coach to say that. He said we're one of, I think he said five. I'm sorry, he said one of five schools that return their head coach and every position coach. And in this day and age, with the portal, with NIL, I know those are more for players, but it's affecting coaches too. And just coaches who are really not at schools for loyalty. And I don't blame a lot of them. They're there for money. To retain your whole staff, that's huge. And we talked about in a previous live stream how big he is in the continuity of the staff. So he talked about that, and it just got me so excited. And he single-handedly mentioned Camden Fryer, a true freshman receiver out of Lake City. Knoll fans who go back a long time might remember his dad, Matt Fryer, who was Charlie Ward's number one receiver in the 93 championship team. So he's been mentioned. He mentioned Luke Cromenhawk, the freshman. Like, we don't expect him to do too much this spring. I'm glad he's here early, but his name has come up a lot. Obviously, we're hoping DJ just does what he needs to do and be the starter and be a nice stopgap between either Luke or Brock for next year. But it was nice to hear his name mentioned. That means he did a great job in the offseason work leading up to spring football. He talked about all that stuff. One of the reporters asked a great question saying, since you have so many new, I was Irish Chaffel, a great reporter at Warchant, asked a great question that really got my attention as well. When he said, since you have so many new people, that even though spring football is used to focus on fundamentals of the game, it's more there than fall camp. Are you going to dial back on that a little because you got so many new guys and you got to teach them the system and everything? And he was like, yes and no. But he also said, we want to make guys feel uncomfortable. And I love that because if I heard a coach say, oh, we want to make it easy as possible on them and acclimate them as easy as possible, that's not great. Even if it works then, what if you start a game off in the first quarter and you get off to a 14-0 deficit? Is that easy as possible? Is that a nice way to be acclimated? No. When he says, I want to make you as uncomfortable as possible, he is saying, I want you ready for games. I love that. It showed in this team this year with his culture, in that when we got down, they really didn't flinch and get freaked out. I love that about Coach Norvell. Now, we had the press conferences Monday. We had his press conference Monday. The coaches talked on Tuesday. Hello. Before we even get into the first practice, we find out around 11, 12 o'clock, Clemson University has joined in the lawsuit with Florida State against the ACC. Now, why is this huge? It sounds huge just to begin with, but why is it huge? First off, I don't want to sound petty, but Florida State was the school who was made fun of for the lawsuit. Not saying by Clemson and Clemson fans, but by a lot of national people and hated rivals. They were made fun of for this lawsuit. We were called petty. We were called the downfall of college sports, even though all these teams that are switching conferences weren't called that. But let's give Florida State a hard time when we can, right? Now, all of a sudden, Clemson joins in the lawsuit, and you could tell they got their ducks in a row before this lawsuit. Not saying we didn't, but Clemson's not in Florida. They didn't have sunshine laws to go through. We did. So that's how we had to publicly announce our lawsuit, basically, which gave the ACC some knowledge going into it. Clemson didn't. So I love it that they're in it, but I love it more importantly that they're joining us in the lawsuit. Because let's be honest, who are the two biggest football programs in the ACC? It's us and Clemson. If Miami fans try to tell you that they are, no, I don't think so. And a realistic Kane fan will tell you that. And not just because they haven't really had much success in the ACC. Well, we really haven't had any. They haven't won a conference title. We won't get into Miami's track record. But what I'm trying to say is, from a viewership standpoint and brand, it goes to Clemson over Miami for sure. And attendance at games, Miami doesn't have a home stadium. Clemson does, and a nice one at that. That's big. Now, I think Clemson might have got some word of where they might be able to wind up should we leave, or if they just want to leave. A lot of people might think that just because Clemson is joining in the lawsuit with us, that if Florida State were to go to the Big Ten, that they'll automatically go with us. I'm not saying that's the case. Clemson might go to the SEC. We might go to the Big Ten. We might go to the SEC. They might go to the Big Ten. I'd be surprised if they wind up in the Big Ten, to be honest. Or we might wind up in the same conferences. It doesn't mean that both of us are tied together no matter what. It just means for this lawsuit purpose, because they want out of the conference, obviously. And they have for a long time. They just haven't been as public about it as Florida State. And they have their reasons. And I also think, and I haven't heard this from anybody, it's my own conspiracy theorist. I think Florida State and Clemson have been lockstep for a long time on this. And it might have been discussed. Hey, we'll start the lawsuit. We'll be the bad guy. We are no matter what. You'll join in on this date. That would be the biggest impact, and to catch them off guard, which I really think it did catch the ACC off guard yesterday. And if it did, shame on them. That means they were so focused on us, they didn't even realize what other teams might be thinking or doing. So I love that. So we're going to keep a close eye on it. Now the hearings are going to get interesting because Florida State filed suit in Tallahassee, obviously. Clemson filed in Pickens County, South Carolina. And obviously the ACC filed in Charlotte. So venue is now even bigger. So I'm curious to see how that goes. Very curious. I'm excited. So after that news yesterday, first day of spring ball, before I get into what I observed, what I listened to experts who I respect talk about, just want to say Ernie Sims, former Knoll linebacker, and since then, obviously played in the NFL for a while, but he has wound up, he's been a linebacker coach at UCF, USF, I don't know if UCF, USF, FAU, he was there for a while, also in the strength department there. a guy that I don't ever want to call for anything, but let's just say Randy Shannon were to move on. He was a guy I was interested in. He was at practice yesterday, and Coach Norvell wouldn't comment on what his role was officially or unofficially. Possibly he was in Knoll gear, observing practice like a coach. Obviously, he's not our linebacker coach, but they haven't made the announcement yet. But my guess is that he's an analyst for this year, which is great to get him, even as an analyst, obviously. And maybe that's just Coach Norvell's way of, after this year, moving on from Coach Shannon, where we just have a succession plan. Because Coach Norvell has always been big about hiring from within. When Kenny Dillingham, our OC, left, he promoted Alex Atkins. And then Tony Tokors, who was an analyst, moved into quarterback coach role. So I could see that. Now, I'm not saying he's not preparing for Randy's like that. I just, as a fan, I think that's a strong possibility. Ernie obviously really wanted to come back home to Tallahassee. That's where he's from. Loves Florida State, obviously, played there. So I think it's just a great fit regardless. I was really happy to hear he was at practice. And Coach Norvell had a real he didn't get defensive about it when he was asked about it. He just gave a smirk and a smile like, can I talk about it? Can I? So I think he wouldn't be there like that if it was secret. So I think we'll get more clarity on that in the next week or so. Now, as far as practice goes, man, this team is fast. But our secondary, I talked about this in the preview. Our secondary can be nasty. Azaria Thomas has the potential to be one of the best lockdown corners in the country. I mean, without a doubt. I'm really excited to see that. I don't want to hear, just as a fan in general, I don't want to hear either way that I don't care if it's the first day, the second day, the last day, whenever. I don't want to hear that the offense, for example, dominated the defense today. I don't want to hear the defense just dominated the offense. Actually, defense, I don't mind a little bit because you just don't want to hear your offense torches your defense that much. Then you got a big problem. If the defense torches the offense a lot, then you got a great defense, especially with the talent we have, and then the offense knows what they have to do to get better. And then they'll probably say, well, if we're going against this defense every day, the games will be a little easier. So you want them around even. You want to hear one day maybe the offense got a little bit better or the defense was a little better or just flat out even. So I heard there was really an 11 on 11, pretty much even, which is great to hear. Camden Fryer's name was mentioned. A lot of these freshman receivers, were mentioned, which is great. I'm happy to hear that. But the one that was talked about a lot was the transfer from Alabama, fifth-year guy Malik Benson. Like I said, he's got top-end speed. Destin Hill was mentioned. Now, just because they're mentioned doesn't mean they're going to be a superstar or have them a monster year. But you like to hear what the coach says, and especially when the coach isn't prompted about it. They just flat out say it. That means they really wanted to point that out. So that is great. Those were guys that, I mean, I didn't even mention Destin the other day. I guess it's still weird for me to see him on the team. I know he played for us last year. But you just still a guy you never thought you'd see on campus. But with his speed, I heard Jalen Brown look smooth. And that one made me happy because I really pumped up that guy. So, like I said, if anybody has any comments or if you're watching or if you watch after I finish, you want to add some comments that happened last time or stream before, someone mentioned something and I made sure to get right back to them. So that's awesome. And one thing the media was really stressing was that there were a lot of former players there at practice, encouraging the team, cheering them on. And that's the culture we talk about. And a lot of these guys were only there maybe a year or two. Some were there longer, of course. A lot of them are in town for Pro Day on Friday, which I wish those guys the best of luck on Pro Day. And they were at practice, and they're meeting with coaches and doing that. And that's the culture. That was one of the things that if we had lost Norvell, I was like, oh, God, we got to start all over in this department. And hopefully it's as good as Mike. So that was just so happy to hear. And he was happy about that. He had mentioned in the press conference that he was watching Jerry Verse and Jermaine Johnson, who didn't even play together, just hang out. And that's You saw that a lot in the Bobby Bowden era. Like I saw that firsthand. I didn't obviously play there, but when I would go by the stadium, because I knew a lot of guys on the team, or if I went to go visit a friend's house, you would see a former player just come over and say hi. They didn't play together, but they had this we're no family relationship, especially guys who also play the same position, even more so. And you're starting to see that again. And I'm not saying Norvell's saying, well, Bobby did it like this, so I will as well. This is his beliefs. This is what he wants in his ways. He's kind of just, that's just him. But he mentioned years ago that, hey, I want to keep Coach Bowden's legacy. And Jimbo did too, to a degree, but he did things so different. And I'm not knocking Jimbo for that. He had some success doing it his way. But it's just in this day and age of, I hate to use the word mercenaries, but you can't blame the kids with the transfer portal and NIL. It's hard just to love your school as much as it used to be. I mean, you might only be there a year or two. You might only be there because you got a better offer than another school. Let's be honest. So just to see that love for the school, man, it just made me so happy, man. Like I was cheering hearing that. That to me does make a difference down the line. Just camaraderie like that. Former players coming back and encouraging the younger ones. That's the culture. That's why even though we had a lot of new players yesterday in the field, it was business as usual, which I loved. Now, wide receiver, I'm going to talk about him, Hakeem Williams. I would like to see some NFL receivers that look like that guy. There aren't that many. Or he looks like an average NFL receiver, and that's a good thing for a 19-year-old kid. So I think that's it for now. I really didn't talk much about the defense. I just heard – I'll get into them a little. Tomohiro from West Virginia, I heard he looked good on the D-line. All those DNs look good. Marvin Jones, Patrick Payton, 15 pounds he put on of muscle. Now, everyone gets excited to hear that, but here are my concerns with that. Not concerns, but just let's be honest. Because I'm always going to be honest. Pat put on 15 pounds. Great. Is he going to have that 15 pounds, all of it between now and the end of spring? Probably not. Definitely not by the end of fall camp. And even if he does have most of it, he is fast off the edge. If you can keep your speed and put on weight, that's awesome. I'm excited to watch some more highlights and see Marvin Jones Jr. out there. I got his dad's shirt on. I think that kid could be what a perfect compliment to Patrick. We might be more deep at defensive end this year. Yeah, we had Verse last year, but after Verse and Payton was kind of just a little bit of a committee. I think we might have a little more depth this year. I think that is another reason why the coaches in general were just so happy at the press conference. At the media day, especially Coach JP, who was saying, I might have the most depth I've had since I've been at Florida State, which we talked about. We're a lot more deep, maybe not as experienced at Florida State. In college, yeah, a lot of them. So that's exciting. Offensive line. I heard Armella is at guard. We talked about that. That could be the case. They're going to be working through so many rotations, and I think the media is going to be a little quiet on what groups are out there when and how that's working. So it's going to be hard to tell. At the spring game, I think you'll see a little bit more clarity in that department. Special teams, you got Ryan Fitzgerald and Mastromanno, and they've been solid the last 3 or 4 years, so it's hard to really report on how they looked. A couple of media guys said, oh, we left when special team stuff came up because we know who we have, which is nice. Nice luxury to have, but you still want to know that they're sharp and clicking. It's just the first day of practice. I mean, nobody talks about this, so I guess I'll say it. There are so many Knowles news outlets. You have your top ones like Ward Chant and Knowles 247 and Knoll Game Day. And if I'm missing one, I'm really sorry that go out and report the practices. So you have so many of those people. Then you have so many people, even like me, who are now talking Knoll football on YouTube and many other sites. So there are so many people talking about it. And one practice is broken down and digested in so many different ways that we overthink things, or that we say, well, I didn't hear this guy's name. Has he fallen behind? It's one day. Let's hear after camp. And Coach is really good about being honest about who really stood out. And that's why I always like to listen to who did a good job. I didn't plan on Camden Fryer playing that much this year, but if he keeps at this trajectory, he might find himself on the field, which is great. You always want to give a coach a reason not to play you versus, oh, he has a reason. You're just not ready. So I hope that kid develops. I hope they all do. Lawayne McCoy from Miami, Jalen Brown, all those guys. So I'm excited. And it sounds like, oh, Kentron Portier. Talked about him. He's wearing number one on offense. I wish that kid, I hope he has a great year. He has dealt with a lot of adversity at Florida State with injuries. He was part of Mike Norvell's first class. If I had gone to public school in Miami, he went to the school that I would have gone to. Nah, I know that's not a reason just alone to root for somebody, but I think that's cool. And everybody has a little pride in their area in high school. So I tend to do that sometimes. But I don't care what high school you went to. If you're at Florida State, I want you to succeed. Or in general, unless you're at a rival school. So I think that's it for now. I'll do another wrestling. I'm looking into just doing my Florida State talk and my wrestling talk separate because I don't want to just get too convoluted. So thank you for your time. If you end up watching this, please leave some comments. If you can subscribe, that would be awesome. I thank you for listening, and let's talk Knoll football. It's spring ball. Let's rock and Knoll, baby. Take care. I'll talk to you later.